This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Radio Hadrian, week 17, in the continuing stage play in the theatre of Catalan independence politics. A question: what do Carles Puigdemont, Nicola Sturgeon, Barack Obama and Winston Churchill have in common? They are all political leaders with slightly different agendas. Admittedly, Obama and Churchill weren't striving for independence or purporting to strive for independence for their people. But all of these political leaders were or are beloved by their people. Nicola Sturgeon is absolutely beloved by Scots independentists, and woe betide you if you say anything against Nicola to the die-hard SNP supporters. And yes, some of you may be listening to this, and I make no apologies for saying that, because the abuse that is hurled at people when you criticise Nicola it verges on the ridiculous. Nicola is beloved of the people in the independence movement in Scotland. And here in Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont also has beloved status. The people love him. He doesn't come over as being a Rajoy type of political leader. He's one of the people. He's friendly. He's happy to go into bars and play his guitar. He makes appearances with his guitar and he plays, popular rock music, and he gets down and friendly with the people. Nicola Sturgeon does the same thing. The queen of the selfies. Everybody's Nicola. Oor Nick, as she gets called. Well, she's not my Nick, because she's betraying her people. Carles Puigdemont is also betraying his people. Barack Obama, when he was elected in 2008, was supposed to be the saviour of the downtrodden people in America, the blacks, the Hispanics, anybody who had not been given a good deal by the traditional political leaders. Along came Barack Obama, the great saviour of social justice. And what did he do? He continued the Iraq War. He probably murdered more people than Bush and Clinton together. Churchill. Okay, that's going back a few years, but why do I say that Churchill has got something in common with these three people? If we go back to World War II, the whole of Great Britain adored Churchill during the war. Before the war, he wasn't a popular figure. But once he became Prime Minister, and indeed he led Britain to victory, he was very smart, he was very aristocratic, very clever, and he was very charismatic. He had a personality and a charm that endeared him to the British people, probably more than any other political leader in history. He brought the USA into the war at a time when the British were worn out, when they didn't think they could fight anymore. And of course that was part of his propaganda. On the face of it, to the exhausted British people, Churchill was a saviour by bringing the United States, a supposedly reluctant United States, into the war, and thus leading the Allied forces to the end of the war. When Churchill died, he was elevated to almost saint status in Britain. His funeral was a public holiday. We were given a day off school, and everybody watched this, that I knew watched this funeral. And I remember that watching this Elgar-fueled funeral in 1965 in our new little black and white TV, and I've never forgotten it. The images were so British and so somber, and the nation was in intense mourning for this man who had saved them. It's a lot of bollocks. He didn't save them. He was responsible for murdering more British military personnel than for saving anybody. Churchill used his charisma and his leadership skills, his persona of being an absolute statesman, to do some filthy, dirty deals behind the scenes, to murder his own people, and to feather his own ego, his own career, his own status. And you have to remember, he was an aristocrat. He was born into an incredibly aristocratic family. And let's face it, aristocrats generally don't really care about ordinary people. And he was no different. And yet he went down in history, in the history books, as being an absolute hero. So whilst he went down in the history books as being one of the world's great heroes, apparently one of the world's great heroes, he was in fact one of the most deceptive, lying, murderous leaders ever. But by presenting as a clever, charming, charismatic man with a plethora of catchphrases that every time he made a public appearance, he made statements that went down into history books as famous quotes. For example, tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. He was an expert in this. That's charisma. And men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing has ever happened. How true is that? That's why what we're doing on Radio Hadrian is so difficult, because when you start looking at the truth, it's quite frightening when you realize that your leaders are betraying you and that your leaders will murder you to meet their own end means. That's frightening. And a lot of people don't want to know the truth or open their eyes and they see the truth, but the truth is frightening, so they go back, they run away from it. And Churchill must surely have known that when he made that statement, because he knew that everything he was doing was not the truth. He spoke a lot about truth. Many of his quotes are about telling the truth and never giving up. But he wasn't referring to ordinary people knowing the truth. He was referring to himself and his henchmen, Roosevelt, the British royal family, his war cabinet, not the ordinary people. You and I are not supposed to know the truth. You and I are supposed to dumb ourselves down, watch rubbish TV, play silly games on our phones, never question anything, and never try to find out the truth. And if we do find out the truth, we are never supposed to try and persuade others. Another thing he commented on, which is interesting, because during the Second World War and in the immediate post-war period leading into the Cold War, Islam was not talked about very much in Britain. But Churchill spoke about Islam. On Islam, Churchill said, "There is no stronger retrograde force existing in the world." Hindsight or not? Of course, his famous speech, his "We Shall Fight" speech, is the one which people will quote the most. And that speech was made to give strength to the British when they were utterly exhausted towards the end of the Second World War, to give them strength to carry on. We shall never surrender. An incredibly powerful speech for a murderer, urging his victims to be stronger and to carry on for him. Incredible. Churchill effectively promoted wonderful values of truth and strength, while at the same time murdering and instigating murder of his own people. Churchill did more for other countries' peoples than he did for British. There were Polish parents whose sons fought for Britain in the RAF, a lot of fighter pilots, and many of these young men died. When these Polish parents later asked Churchill to help them in locating the graves of their sons, Churchill dismissed them. And he told them that those graves were of no consequence. He ignored them, these young men that had given their lives for his cause. At Stalin's request, he was a great friend of Stalin, he annexed to the Soviet Union all of the Polish land that Stalin had been awarded. He was the instigator not only of the deaths of many, many British and American young men, but also of the fratricide of the greatest number of people in history. He was a disaster and he was a traitor to the British. And yet he has gone down in the history books as being one of Britain's greatest heroes. He lied his way through the war. He lied to his own people in order to preserve his own career. But let's come closer to home. Without going into the intricate details of why the Spanish Civil War had to end in conjunction with Spain joining or not joining the Second World War, Churchill paid Franco millions of dollars in order for Franco not to back Hitler in 1940. He appeased the Franco regime to such an extent that it allowed the Spanish gold stocks to be rebuilt during the Second World War. It also allowed, I know my view, this might be challenged, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's about Churchill, not so much about Franco. It also allowed Franco's regime to continue well after World War II and throughout the Cold War. And the relevance of Churchill here is less his relationship with Franco, but more about the continuing lies and deception. He may have led Britain to victory, but Stalin also led his people to victory. And I don't think that the Russians would actually have Stalin up there as their number one hero. Britain is very good at creating heroes. It's very good at exporting brand Britain. And Churchill is one of those products. He's one of the biggest products of brand Britain. And the export of brand Britain through Churchill is on a much lesser note, is that there is a new British film about Churchill. And Britain is also very, very good at making wonderful historical films about the people who brand Britain wants to promote as being the wonderful democratic heroes of Britain and the embers of the British Empire, and keep perpetuating the myth that Britain is good. And Britain is not good. And Churchill was not a good man. Churchill was an evil, corrupt, murdering aristocrat. And the reason I go on about Churchill so much, I'm going to move on from Churchill, is to show that how we can be made to love our leaders, our political leaders, to such an extent that we are blinded to what they do and we don't question anything. We blindly follow them. That's what so many independentists in Scotland do with Nicola. They did it with Alex Salmond, but they do it much more with Nicola. They do it here with Carles Puigdemont. These two people, both who maintain they represent independence movements, both whom present as being not your Rajoy type of political leader, not your Barack Obamas or your Bushes. They're friendly, they're nice. Well, they're not nice, but that's the view we're given of them. That's what we're meant to think. They're friendly, they belong to us, they're one of us. Or Nick, slightly chaotic looking Carles Puigdemont with his guitar. It's all part of the stage play. They're characters. These are characters that have been created in a stage play so that the audience are going to love them. For those of you who are listening who know what a pantomime is, everybody in Scotland knows what a pantomime is. It's a farcical stage play in which nothing is real, everything is not what it's supposed to be. Men play women and women play men. There's always goodies and there's always baddies. And when the goodies, which of course are characters that have been created, appear on stage, the audience cheer for them. When the baddies appear, the audience boos for them, because that's what you are supposed to do. That's how pantomimes work. And when bad things happen to the goodies, the audience get very angry and they stick up for the goodies. Does this sound familiar? This is what happens to Nicola Sturgeon, and this is what happens with Carles Puigdemont at this moment. If the establishment, let's say the Tory party or Westminster, or anybody actually, attack Nicola Sturgeon, her beloved followers come out in force to defend her. It's just like the pantomime. They trust in her. And they say, oh, no, she knows. Our Nick knows what she's doing. She's got a great plan. She knows what she's doing. She's very clever. And we have to have patience and we have to trust her. Like heck. She hasn't got your interests at heart. She has her own interests at heart. Her career, her pension, her bosses in London. It's exactly the same with Carles Puigdemont. He's been dangling the carrot of independence to people. He persuaded the people here. He worked with Òmnium Cultural to get a referendum. But it was to get a referendum, it wasn't to get independence. If you listened to the previous couple of Radio Hadrian programs, you would have heard me saying, no, this is wrong. The people should not be crying for democracy or we want to vote. They should be crying, we want independence, because Puigdemont had a referendum. Puigdemont had a mandate already, and yet he led the people down the garden path to have another referendum. But weeks later, Catalonia still doesn't know if it's got independence or not. Of course, we know it isn't going to get independence. That's not on the cards. But he is still stringing the people along with his delaying tactics and his nonsense. On Tuesday night this week, David and I went to Arc de Triomphe, and we, with thousands and thousands of other people, stood waiting to hear his announcement, a much proclaimed announcement that apparently was going to be about him declaring independence. And we waited, and we waited, and then everybody was told, no, he's going to delay it for another hour. So, another hour to build up the emotions, to keep everybody on tenterhooks, and the emotions indeed were running high. There were people standing around us who were crying, who were tense. There were also people around who were just partying as well. It wasn't so intense for them. And we were told he was going to take another hour. He needed to have talks, so he disappeared off into a room with various other people. And when he emerged an hour later, he started talking, and he said all the right things. He said all the wonderful emotional things, because that's what people wanted to hear. He talked about the violence and how appalling the violence was. He talked about how the Catalan people have overwhelmingly voted in favour of independence. He talked about all of the things that he was supposed to talk about. And then, the people's emotions were at fever pitch, because there were people standing near us. Everybody expected him to declare independence. This is what they had been led to believe was going to happen. And what he said was that the Catalan people have earned the right to be independent. Well, apart from David and myself, and I'm sure there were other people, but we were surrounded by people who went berserk. They went absolutely berserk. They thought they'd got independence. They were crying, they were laughing, they were hugging, they were kissing. And then he added, or should I say he dropped his bombshell, when he said, but he was going to suspend it while he talked. There was silence. In this crowd, there was absolute silence. We left. We were very angry, and other people were also leaving. Other people that we encountered and talked to were also very, very angry. He had betrayed the people. He'd led the Catalan people up a garden path for 2 years. He'd got the referendum, and then he betrayed them. There should have been an outcry, but there wasn't. What happened was that whilst there are probably a growing number of people who feel the same way we do, that this is not acceptable, he's a traitor, there are also people who started talking about, oh, but you have to trust him. He's got a cunning plan. He knows what he's doing. He's going to come back and he's going to tell us what this plan is. And they still believe in him. They believe what he says. Just like Scots independentists believe what Nicola says. Just like the blacks and Hispanics in America believed what Barack Obama said. And just like millions of British believed Churchill. And at this point in the theatre of Catalan Independence, the great stage play of Catalan Independence, we are now all on tenterhooks and nervous. Well, maybe nervous isn't the right word, but let's say the atmosphere here continues to be tense and uncertain, and the people are being dangled carrots all the time. We're waiting for Monday. Monday being the culmination of the 5 days that Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy gave Carles Puigdemont to say, well, did you declare or did you not declare? And it turns out as well that David and I met a politician who David knows this man quite well, and he stated that they now don't even think that the papers that Puigdemont and his cabinet signed on Tuesday night were the real papers, that they were wrong papers. So, I mean, it's a farce. It's an absolute farce. But here we are all waiting for Monday, because Monday is the day Puigdemont is going to let everybody know whether he declared or whether he didn't declare, and whether it was on the right paper or the wrong paper. I'm not going to speculate on what's going to happen because I don't have a crystal ball and things keep changing here. They keep changing all the time. The only thing I do suggest might happen is that something else will stall the process. This waiting game, this giving 5 days, a week, or whatever, will continue. It will continue until a point where I think a second referendum will be agreed upon in 2019, and of course that gives Spain and the Catalan government plenty of time to murder any chances of independence here. But here's the thing. In the European Parliament, Juncker has now publicly stated that he does not want to see a European Union consisting of 98 little countries. That's very significant. As far as I can see, that says, forget it, Scotland, forget it, Catalonia, forget it, all these other little places throughout Europe, all of you forget it. Europe is not about lots of little independent countries with their own little agendas. No, Europe is about several big, powerful nations. Now, what that means for Brexit, who knows? I personally don't think Brexit's going to happen, but what it does do is it says to me, in Scotland, you know, Nicola's pushing the idea that in an independent Scotland would be able to have its own place in Europe. I used to believe in Europe. I used to believe in the European Union, and when Brexit happened, I was somewhat concerned that this would mean Scotland would no longer be part of Europe, an economic Europe. Now I see it very differently. I don't see that being part of the EU is anything to write home about. Clearly, the EU is about big bullies and dominance. So if you want to be independent, why would you want to be part of the EU? If you have any doubts about your beloved political leaders' capabilities of betraying you, I suggest that you watch a documentary called Operation Gladio. And Operation Gladio is, let's say, it's an undisputed historical fact. Gladio was a part of post-World War II programs, you know, the various things that were set up after the end of World War II. And it was set up by the CIA and by NATO, apparently, to thwart future Soviet or communist invasions or influences in Italy and in Western Europe in general. In fact, it became a state-sponsored right-wing terrorist network involved in false flag operations and the subversion of democracy. I really recommend you watch this film. It will open your eyes if you doubt that your leaders can betray you. The existence of Gladio was confirmed and admitted by the Italian government in 1990, years and years after it was set up, after a judge, Felice Carson, discovered the network in course of his investigations into right-wing terrorism in Italy. The Italian Prime Minister, Gio Andretti, admitted Gladio's existence, but he tried to diminish it. And the main function of Gladio-style groups in the absence of the Soviet invasion seems to have been to discredit left-wing political groups through the use of the strategy of tension. The strategy of tension, where have we heard that before? Ah, yes, the strategy of tension, including false flag terrorism. Oh, where have we heard that before? Ah, yes, August, Barcelona. Strategy of terrorism, the strategy of tension. History repeats itself. The strategy of tension is a concept for control and manipulation of public opinion through the use of fear, losing your pension, the banks moving out of Catalonia, the stock market going up and down, the threat of military intervention. It manipulates public opinion. The aim of Operation Gladio was to instill fear into a population whilst also framing communist and left-wing political opponents for terrorist atrocities. If you haven't already watched it, watch Operation Gladio. It's not very long, but it will open your eyes to so many things. So many things. And if you watch it once, watch it again and again and again until you really truly believe how we can be manipulated through fear and false flag attacks and made to believe things that are not true. And we're made to believe these things by our own leaders, our own so-called beloved leaders. To sum up, the Australian journalist John Pilger. I don't agree with everything John Pilger says these days. I soaked up everything he said when I migrated to Australia, and I discovered him, although he was living in England and working for The Guardian at the time. But I fell in love with John Pilger's work. Now I question some of it. However, here's another little video that you might like to watch. This is it's a very short video. It only goes for less than 4 minutes. And it's John Pilger interviewing ex-CIA chief Dwayne McClarridge. How's that for a name? Dwayne McClarridge. And during this short interview, Pilger challenges McClarridge on CIA and American operations, American military operations in South America, particularly in Chile. Pilger asks McClarridge, so is that okay to overthrow a democratically elected government? McClarridge answers, it depends on what your national security interests are. National security, not being Chile's national security, but being the United States national security. Pilger, what right do you have to do what you do in other countries? McClarridge, in no uncertain terms, says, we will do whatever we have to do to protect our national security. Everything we do must be in our national security's interests. And we are going to go on protecting ourselves. If it's not in the best interests of the CIA, of the US and the CIA, then it's not on. He finishes by saying, and if you don't like it, lump it. Get used to it, world. You can't get a clearer message than that. World? Get used to it, world? If it's not in the best interest of the US, it's not going to happen. And that's why I repeatedly say, Independence is not on the cards for Scotland, it's not on the cards for Catalonia. The independence of these two countries are tied up with conflicting interests for NATO and for NATO member countries. So it's not going to happen. But they're going to let us believe it happens because we're supposed to live in democracies. We're supposed to live in these wonderful democratic countries. And this is Europe, This is not Southeast Asia. This is Europe, and we're supposed to live in democracies. But we don't. We live in pseudo-democracies. And we are being duped and lied to and led down the garden path by beloved leaders. Well, I don't love them. They are beloved leaders, though, to so many people. All to preserve the national interests of the United States of America. Who knows what will happen between now and next Sunday? It's going to be another interesting week here. Have a good week. Stay safe. And thanks for listening. Bye for now.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Only the one you listen to can lie to you. Only the one you believe in can trick you. Only the one you trust can betray you. Only the one you give your heart to can break it. Only the one close to you can stab you in the back. Good afternoon, Scotland and rest of the world. This is David Raventós. This is chapter 17 here in Radio Hadrian, the only program controlled by the Catalan Resistance and the Scottish Resistance. And today we're gonna go on about explaining what the situation is in the Catalan independence process and what might be expected for next week. We do this wholly believing that the independence of Catalonia will trigger Scottish independence. So we don't feel we have to apologize for being centered a lot in what goes on in this side of the board, because when we're working for Catalan independence, we're also working for Scottish independence. That's why I linked my hunger strike of last year that ended up in censorship, internment and chemical torture. I linked Catalan and Scottish independence because we are suffering the same mind games, the same psyop, the same mental genocide, both in Scotland and Catalonia, through people that are connecting both processes. And now it's the time where the crack in this matrix might appear in Catalonia, so we're gonna break this system in Catalonia, and that will help Scotland enormously. Today, after having introduced this, these sentences are not like New Age sentences or these empty sentences that run across in social media. These sentences are to express that nowadays, both in Scotland and Catalonia, repression won't come through military ways. It comes by mind games that makes us trust the ones that work for the New World Order or for Britain or for Spain in this case. So it's only our side can let us down, and that's what's going on. There's no way we can win if both sides work for the enemy. So today I'll go through, explain what the strategy, the teams, the situation is in Catalonia, but we're doing it. We are addressing the top 10,000 people in Scotland and the top 10,000 people in Catalonia, which are intelligent, informed, free-thinking enough, mature enough, and honest enough to look the truth in the eye and realize we've been had. We've been taken for the biggest ride of our lives by our own side. So this is not, we need millions of people both in Scotland and Catalonia, but the same way as not everybody can be a parachutist to infiltrate opposite lines, but everybody can collaborate in a war effort by hiding other people or producing food or doing all kind of things. We need everybody. Everybody is as important. Everybody is necessary. We need everybody, but every person has different capabilities, attitudes, timings, and needs to be treated different. So in this moment, if you don't feel you can cope with the hard truths in Scotland and Catalonia, please stand aside and don't spread lies to protect the SNP in Scotland or to protect Junts pel Sí and CUP in Catalonia, because both SNP in Scotland and CUP and Junts pel Sí here are the main tools that Westminster and Spain have to murder both our independences. The game it has been proven there's three ways. The truth is like a liquid, and to avoid a liquid leaking, you need everything without any gush or any hole. So you need to have everything, and that's why I had to be put in a mental place, because somebody who's quite relevant here, having studied with the people running the political show in Catalonia, saying that they're all traitors, that the plan is to murder Indy, it was a threat for them. So that's why they had to torture me, silence me, and put me there. The other is that the strategy cannot be better. No matter how many years pass, we've learned that the IRA was infiltrated 50% in the running committee when they were dismantled. So if something like the IRA can be infiltrated 50% when they have like counter-espionage and they being discovered means death sentence on the spot, how easy it is to infiltrate the SNP, as the late and loved Margaret MacDonald let us know before the referendum. So we have to understand what the game is here, and I'll use Catalonia as an example, but the same applies to Scotland. The strategy in both countries is to murder independence while pretend to do it through democratic ways, to keep the moles that run Scotland and Catalonia in place, to avoid contagion, to kill our independences for 50 or 100 years, and to mock us, if possible, during the process. And this, in the case of Catalonia, means running every media, grassroots organization, political party, and social media. Because that way, the truth that is defended by the Catalan resistance and the Scottish resistance won't be able to reach the billions of people that are kidnapped, the millions of people who want independence of our countries, but now they are going through motions that don't help to it. Because by supporting SNP or Catalan political parties, we won't get independence. By supporting referendums that don't bring independence, we won't get independence. Both referendums and our political parties and media are the tools of our enemies to euthanize our independence. Now, coming back to Catalonia, the situation is as follows. They plan to kill our independence through a Scottish-style referendum in a couple of years' time, but now they have to do it in a very surrealistic, perverse motion, because Unionists don't want to hear about referendums, and Independentists, we have already won independence. So now they have to push, and they have to do it through mind games and little tricks and little surprises and little postponements and little declarations that are not declarations, and you name it. They need to play mind games both with Unionists and with Independentists, because as we learned from Leo Strauss in one prior chapter of this, they need to lie to 99% of us. And that means they have to lie both to the Independentist side and both to the Unionist side to make everybody accept something that has been decided in a war room, where every country, every power in the world, Spain and the Catalan leaders are there, but neither the Unionist grassroots nor the Independentist grassroots are represented. So the final strategy is that to do that, they have to do it through all these little tricks. But the main relevant objective now is to protect, to save Carles Puigdemont and Oriol Junqueras, number 1 and 2 in Catalan government, which are the ones, as we said in the introduction, the ones we love, the ones we listen to, the ones we believe, the ones that we trust, the ones that can stab us in the back. And they are highly advanced in the process of doing so. So saving private, not very private, saving public Puigdemont, saving public Junqueras is the immediate objective. And that's why secret services in Spain, through their thousands and thousands of fake profiles in social media, are saying that we should stand as one, unity behind our leaders and all. That's what Spain needs. It's as perverse as this. And that's why you have to choose between joining the Catalan or Scottish resistance, or you working for the UK and Spain, whether you know it or not. This is a conflict between our resistance and our enemies running everything on our side. And to reach this, We have identified malls like Joan Vives and Soler Vicens, which we talk in chapter 5. We know how they infiltrated Puigdemont, we said in chapter 3. We know how they infiltrated number 2, Oriol Junqueras, in chapter 4. In chapter 2, you have how they had to do the things they did to me to avoid that the truth comes out. In chapter 1, we explain how they murdered Muriel Casals, the Catalan Willie McRae. We have uncovered people like Podemos and Pablo Iglesias in chapter 6, WikiLeaks in chapter 8, or the artificially made Ada Colau, mayor of Barcelona, in chapter 7. From chapter 9, 10, 11, you have the false flag in Barcelona that was necessary to promote some local heroes that are going to stab us in the back and to put fear or independence on us. In chapter 12, we declared independence the way it should be. And from chapter 13, we outline how the plan of Spain is to murder independence through a Scottish-style referendum in 2019. So please, it's necessary that everybody listens to all chapters. It's necessary that everybody shares these chapters. Being part of the Scottish and Catalan Resistance doesn't mean having to take risks. If we have 100 people professionally sharing these programs, that will bring us 20, 30, 40,000 listeners per program. And out of there, we only need 1 out of 4 people in Scotland and in Catalonia to form the resistance. And with these 10,000 people, we're going to wake everybody who's been narcotized or is narcoleptic in the hands of our enemies. Going to what you've seen, nothing that reaches you is true, the same way as nothing that reaches us is true. So it's, but it was important here. We had this thing that happened the 10th, and they said they have declared independence but postponed it. That is not true. What they did is fake. It's just like using all the media they have, but I clarify now and I won't say it anymore. Unionist parties, media, panelists, social media don't matter anything. Stop attacking Tories, Labour, UKIP, Lib Dem. Stop. They have no say. They have no say, and on top of that, that's slave thinking. Our freedom don't depend on our enemy. It depends on us. It's on our hands. So stop being disinformed and disinforming others. It's not the openly unionist side that's going to murder independence. It's the so-called pro-indie leaders that do it. The only way to rig a sport game, the only sure rig to make sure that one side is going to lose, is to bribe the side you want to lose. Because it doesn't. If you bribe the side that wants to win, they might do their best, but they might not succeed. But if you have infiltrated the losing side, it is impossible. It's like playing chess. I visualize it. You have UK and Spain playing chess with the white pieces, and they have a mobile phone next to them, and you have somebody who pretends to play for Scotland or who pretends to play for Catalonia, and after Spain has moved, he sends a WhatsApp ordering the SNP side or the Catalan side to move the piece according what Spain needs or UK needs. That way it's impossible to win. But then we have millions of people as spectators, both in Scotland and Catalonia, that they don't see that there's a WhatsApp being sent from Spain. That's the part we miss. There's a secret WhatsApp communication between Spain and UK and the Scottish and Catalan Indie side. And they send this, and there's millions of spectators that sometimes don't understand the moves, or they think it's a cunning plan. It's not. It's a movement devised by our imperial enemies to make us lose every game. And you lost in a referendum, and now we'll see what goes on, but it doesn't give the feeling that Scotland or Catalonia are on the edge of independence. It might look more in Catalonia because now the theater show has moved to Catalonia these days, but we are not on the edge of independence, though we've had majority in both parliaments. You've had 56 out of 59 in Westminster. You have everything you needed to declare independence, but they didn't declare. Why? Because they don't work for you. Why they haven't declared in Catalonia? Because they work for the enemy. I mean, no matter, it's just a matter of cognitive dissonance. It's there. We have it in front of our eyes, and we need the bravest, mentally mind-capable people to grasp this truth, and we're gonna help the rest waking up, and together, none of us more important than nobody else, we're gonna march together towards the independence we've been wanting for 300 years. What happened in Catalonia, and Delia and me were present there, it's one of the worst acts of betrayal, mockery, and deception in the history of my country, and it could be possibly one of the saddest days if we don't win. If we don't win, historians will only have Radio Hadrian chapters to explain what happened in Catalonia the last years, because all the official version, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. Muriel Casals dying through a bike. Me being put in hospital because I do a hunger strike for independence. They telling us that we haven't won independence when we did. They not declaring independence when they should. 5 days to decide if you've declared independence or not. It's a film, but it's a very bad one. If it was a real film, people would have walked out of the room where it was shown a long time ago. So they didn't declare. They let us think. They used words. They let people celebrate for 10 seconds and then bang, they said, oh, but we leave it suspended. But it was not voted in Parliament, so it was not passed. It doesn't have a fixed date where it would be acting if there's no mediation. It's based on a condition, which is mediation. So it's nothing of what they said. We don't have the Slovenian way. We have nothing. Now we have CUP, ANC, and other minor players asking government to raise something that didn't happen because they didn't declare independence. They prepared for us in our media the 2 days before, and it's brainwashing of the worst kind. We've had television saying, Puigdemont go to prison, and they said this Unionist, so people would love Puigdemont. We've had Nobel Prize winners asking for mediation. We've had Ada Colau asking for mediation. And we've had a member of European Parliament. So if you didn't know what the member of European Parliament is worth for, or it has its uses, it seems. We didn't know they had any use. We knew that they get paid a lot of money and a lot of free dinners and all that. But now we found out what they are. Ramon Tramosa, ex-member of Federació Nacional d'Estudiants de Catalunya, like I was, came in television to say that maybe they could use the Slovenian way. So, the Slovenian way meaning that you declare independence but you postpone it. But the differences with Slovenia are big. They were like, they had an armed conflict, and United States and Germany, though they pretended not to, they wanted to break up Yugoslavia and take Slovenia on their side. So, nothing to do with Slovenia here, guy. But it was necessary, because then the next day, after postponing things for an hour and letting us know that there were shenanigans going, they killed independence in front of us. And now they are moving. It's difficult because without understanding what we said about what the teams are every political party, media, grassroots organization at the level of direction works for Spain. And they have hijacked 3 million Catalan independentists that act like human shields of these parties, media, and organizations. And these parties, media, and organizations are human shields of Spain. And on the other side, it's just a group of resistance that for 4 years have been fighting this. And we have a tremendous strong ally, which is the truth. It's a group of resistance plus the truth, fighting all our media parties, Spain, and 3 million people that are shooting at their own foot or head. But most people are waking up. Next week, they seem that they might lift the suspension, which would be a double lie. They cannot put in force something they didn't approve. But then again, as they have every party, media, social media, thousands of infiltrated profiles, like Marc Serraparés, Joan Vives, and other people that is not interesting for the world at large, they now can pretend they have lifted the postponing, the same way as they invented they had declared it. What would be the objective? Then, with the real declaration of independence, then Spain will put more pressure or threaten with violence, and that would create the conditions for international mediation. international mediation, then possibly we'll go through long meetings, people getting away from the table because somebody had not been nice to them, some people being substituted, and all these theatrical things they need to do to twist the minds of 47 million people living in the Spanish state to accept a referendum we don't want. And that sums up what the situation is here. So if you want to stay tuned in the Catalan situation, if you want to join the Scottish or the Catalan Resistance, there's two teams here. One team includes every party, grassroots organization, media you can name. And then on the other hand, there's a group of people who is not afraid of the hard truth. We're getting more people behind us every day. We're getting organized. We're going to set Catalonia free first. But secondly, you have a word here. I think I can speak in the name of the resistance to say that our main objective after Catalonia becomes independent, because if it does, it's going to be through the hands of people in the Catalan resistance. We are focused on helping as much as we can Scottish independence after that. Let's do this. Visca Catalunya I Escòcia, guanyarem.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.